If you can tell me a little bit about the character you play and what attracted you to play James Hunt.
Yeah, I played James Hunt, who's a Formula One driver in the 70s who kind of embodied the sex and the glamour and the fun of Formula One in that time and all the glory and what have you. But was also a pretty, you know, contradicting kind of personality and contrast and had, you know, there was a tabloid kind of image we had of him, but there was a whole nother side to him, which was a insecurity and a vulnerability and a frustration at not being acknowledged for kind of, you know, who he was or what he wanted to achieve or could achieve. And that fascinated me, you know, all those traits and the contrast in who this guy was. And the story I found, you know, amazing, and the fact that it was true and it wasn't fiction was even more kind of mind-blowing. And Ron Howard directing the movie was, you know, pretty much the, the reason initially I jumped in.
Right. And because it was a real story, I mean, unlike Daniel, who was able to meet the man who he was playing, unfortunately you weren't able to, but how did you approach playing the character?
You know, I just did as much kind of research as I could and spoke to people who knew him and read books on biographies on him and watched a lot of interviews, and probably the most, the biggest kind of indication into who he was the B-roll footage of that the BBC had given us of interviews with James and outtakes of interviews where he's just kind of screwing around and having fun and, you know, making jokes, and you see an insight into this guy was a kid. You know, he was is a fascination and to the way he approached the world and interest in things and an intrigue and a real ownership of his environment. You know, just like young kids, they, you know, pick something up if they want that, good. If not, throw it away, on to the next thing. And he was like that, and that was, you know, a fairly refreshing sort of attitude, especially to see in an adult, you know.
And actually, what about the flip side? Did you meet the real Niki Lauda, and did he give you any kind of interesting anecdotes kind of from the rival perspective?
No, I didn't see him until literally a couple of days ago. I didn't get to meet him when we were shooting, and I saw him and I said, oh, you know, he was doing a bunch of press and what have you, and I said, oh, how's it all going? You having fun? Nope, boring. And that was, you know, I said, oh, what are you doing later? You know, he said, more of this bullshit, and that instantly kind of hit me, and I just thought, this is the guy, you know, this is the undiplomatic, say it how it is, take it or leave it sort of attitude that both Daniel and I fell in love with, you know, doing this movie.
Excellent. And so, you know, I know you've seen the film, and when you saw it for the first time, what was the most surprising thing for you?
The sort of visual element to this film, the way it's shot is just beautiful. But the fact that it, you know, wasn't just a Formula One movie, it was a movie about human beings and a real character study on these vastly contrasting characters. And one was intuitive and visceral, and the other one was a mathematician, the way he approached things. And just how kind of impactful I think that the whole story and the sort of emotion and glory and tragedy around that 1976 season played. It was kind of, you know, I didn't expect to kind of be taken back like that, and that was, you know, not often do you get to experience that. It was cool.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Chris.